Welcome to In the Studio on Davis Media Access. I'm Tim Gaffaney. Well, if I were to describe our guest today, I would have to include the terms joyful and lively. And by some beautiful coincidence, those are exactly the meanings associated with her name, Allegra. At the age of 91, Allegra Silberstein is active on the Davis poetry circuit and continues to publish her work. Her latest collection, out in the summer of 2022, is Dancing with the Morning Breeze, poems that speak of light and shadows and of the people in the dance of our lives. She is also the author of the collection West of Angels, published in 2015, along with three additional shorter collections of poetry. In March of 2010, she was appointed the first poet laureate for the city of Davis. I should add that dance and music are also great loves of her life. Allegra has performed in Davis with Pamela Trokansky's Third Stage Dance Company for nearly 30 years. And she has sung for many years with Threshold Choir, which shares their voices with those near death. Allegra, welcome to In the Studio.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and such an honor also to be here. Thank you so
Well,
much.
it is an honor to have you, Allegra. Well, would you mind starting out by reading to us from your latest collection, Dancing with the Morning Breeze?
I'd love to. This poem is called Bending into Blue. Caught in cabin dreams, I rest my head in branches of living green, in a mystery of blue, in the miracle of morning that lights windows where I slept, where dreams entered unannounced. Waking, I put aside unborn issues lurking in secret places and rise to meet this day, questing in meditation beneath the valley oak with branches that hover like wings of my better angel held in dawnlight, with living movement between the leaves. A green singing calls my name.
That was just beautiful. Thank you so much. And we'll have a chance to hear another one of your poems, I think, a little further on in the interview. So let's just start big. Let's talk about your love for poetry and how, as I understand it, it was kindled in your childhood by your mother reading to you. Is that correct?
Yes, I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, and it was in the Depression. People didn't have money to buy books or buy classes or this kind of thing. But my mother would, as she was working, recite poems that she remembered, and or stories sometimes too. And so I was blessed by that.
So then, did you begin writing poetry yourself as a child?
Well, I think I began writing probably, I remember in grade school, I always loved to read poems by other people, but I remember starting to write poetry in my high school years. These are terribly dramatic and miserable years in many ways for many people. And they were exciting. But also, this is a time when you use poetry to sort of spill out your grief. Thank goodness I don't have any of those poems anymore.
Can you remember any of the poems that your mother would recite to you, or any of the titles?
Well, one of them I know was The Children's Hour by Longfellow, and that's how I got my name too. Longfellow speaks of his three daughters, and he tells how they're descending the stairway, and he hears their voices. There's grave Alice and laughing Allegra and Edith with golden hair. And it so happens that I had a cousin named Edith who was born before me, and Alice, who was born before me. And, even though my parents only had eighth grade education, they had wonderful teachers who brought them many wonderful things into their lives. So my name comes from the Children's Hour.
That is a great story. That is such a wonderful thing. Now, being from Wisconsin, when you did start to write poetry in earnest, uh, did that prairie landscape, and I ask this because I know that nature is an important part of your poetry, the natural world. Did that prairie landscape inspire some of your earliest work?
I think that Wisconsin childhood of mine has stayed with me all through my life. Um, and it was the whenever I felt sad or lonely, I would just go into the woods, um, and kind of commune with nature and the trees and the flowers there, and that meant so much to me. And I think that this closeness to the earth and to nature is one of the things that stayed with me all my life.
Well, the
I may not have.
subtitle of your latest
Oh,
collection. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I may not have written as many poems then about Wisconsin as I have in later life, looking back to my
Uh-huh.
time in Wisconsin.
Okay. And I think I remember reading something about how your forebears passed up the flat farmlands of Wisconsin and went a little further west to the edge of a river. Did that make a difference as
Right.
well then?
Well, and also very close by there was lovely flat land, but they chose some of this unglaciated area in Wisconsin that had high hills, so high that Easterners would think of them as mountains when they came up because of the Appalachians are very, very low. Um,
Uh-huh.
but they settled in a place where they could find nice spring water flowing, and where there were these high hills that were as familiar as the mountains in Norway.
Wonderful. Well, the subtitle of your latest collection is Poems That Speak of Light and Shadows and of the People in the Dance of Our Lives, which is such a beautiful metaphor. Um, but I wanted to ask you, what do you mean by the dance of our lives? Do you see dance as a metaphor for joyful living, or have I missed it altogether somehow?
That's a great question. I see dance not just as joyful, but also, sometimes when I'm creating a dance, there might be sorrow in the dance, and the dance is not, yeah, it's a metaphor for life, but it's also dance is movement, and it's the movement that's in our lives. Um, I think, I guess what comes to me right now is that idea that, you know, we keep learning and growing and moving no matter how old we are. And that's one of the miracles of life.
And you are still moving as a nonagenarian,
Right. Thank
someone in
you.
her 90s. I remember we talked about that earlier. So,
Yeah.
a little bit more about your poetry in general. Can you say something about the role that light and color play in your poetry?
Light and color. Yeah. Another good question. I think for me, light is particularly significant. Um, and I'm always, just in my life, I'm always amazed by the magic of light. You know, the way in the morning the sun can make a golden glow, paint the trees with its color, or the way in the late afternoon the light might shine on just an everyday old weed and make it so beautiful as the light is fading. Um, and with colors, Um, I guess I have my favorite colors. I think green and blue are no, I, I can't say two colors. Colors are just so beautiful. The whole spectrum of the rainbow, plus plus the black and the white and the brown as well. Um, and color, it's so important, isn't it?
Yes. Well, let's move to another theme in your poetry. And as a way to introduce that, may I ask you to read another poem?
Oh, I would love to. You know, I love to read poems, whether it's my own or somebody else's. And the lovely thing is that people usually like to have me read their poems, so that's wonderful. But this one is what I wrote quite a long while ago. But I I still enjoy this poem partly because it brings me back to a memory of grandfather, and it's called "A Room of One's Own," and it's thanks to Virginia Woolf for the title. I ought to be writing learned poems, their wisdom gleaming starkly as Georgia O'Keeffe's clean picked bones against yellow desert sands. How long have I got to make my mark in this world? Instead, I sit with grandfather at the hospital, caress his hands, mottled dark with injuries from falls, skin slack and strangely soft, incongruous black hairs, growing young and strong between knuckles that stretch out of his skin like mountain peaks. His beard and little halo of hair, all salty silver with pepper touch, gives him a saintly look. I try to talk. With his one hearing aid lost and the other not working well, what he hears is me speaking nonsense. He repeats what he's heard, checking for accuracy. He always did. Wondering, I suppose, if my mind were weakening. I speak again, slower, enunciating each word until we come to some compromise of meaning. I should apply for a job negotiating treaties with the hard of hearing leaders of this world. Occasionally, there's a flash of old wit, and his eye twinkles. He has only one. Out of the blue, remembering perhaps some bit of a play or a poem, he asks me, Irish eyes or English eyes? I smile and answer, both. Going with the tide, rather than striving for some stable base of comprehension. I hold his hand. He holds on to mirages, sure that a certain young nurse wants to get into his bed. Restless in his wheelchair, he looks toward the door of his hospital room and speaks with longing. If I could just get through, I could find my room. He speaks for me too. I want to find my place, that room of one's own, if I could just get through.
There is so much going on in that poem, obviously, including an untoward reference to the nurse getting in his bed, which I just love amidst all the other things in there. Um, but it reminded me of something one reviewer wrote of you. This reviewer said, Allegra's poems carry the reader away from fear and towards compassion. So if you agree with that, and I hope you would, I was wondering if you could just say something about this poem and compassion.
Ah, yes, yes. That's one of the things that I think is really important in one's life. There's so many things that can make us afraid, um, but the healing force of compassion is so important. And the the writing this poem for Grandfather Silberstein was something that was so important to me. He was someone I loved dearly and who loved me dearly too, I know. Um, and the the compassion is, I think it's like seeing all of some faults and the things that aren't so great, and at the same time, this wonderful sense of, I don't know, I think love and compassion are probably so closely related. It's hard to really completely separate the two.
Thank you for that. Well, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, and as I think back over my introduction to you, I may have overlooked and not mentioned the fact, which has now been showing on the screen, that you were appointed the first poet laureate for the city of Davis back in March of 2010. Um, and I'm wondering if you could just, as we end this wonderful conversation, say something about the city of Davis and how your time in Davis. I think you've been here almost 60 years, is it? If you could say something about, how the city of Davis has nurtured all these beautiful talents that you've then in turn shared with us.
You know, I think there is a kind of back and forth that happens for this. Um, One of the things that I did, I think that first of all, let me say, I was so amazed when I was picked as the first poet laureate. I wasn't going to apply. I thought there's just too many good poets here. But a friend of mine said, "Well, sure, come on, apply. It'll be nice. You'll have all this record of things you've done, things." So we did. And but anyway, getting back to your question, the the one of the things, I've been connected. One of the big ways I was connected with poetry with Davis through the years was through the other voice. And in 1997, no, yeah, 1997, I think it was, two other poets from the Unitarian Church, Theodore Gold and Ray Coppett, and both of these men are now no longer with me, no longer in this life. But we had the first other voice reading, and we started it by just having mainly local people who would be invited to perform once a month, and then through the years, because I was there for many years, I and until 2018, I think it was, and that's when James Lee Job took over. But this was a way of integrating with the people of Davis, and the also there were many when we first moved to Davis, my ex and I, one of our good friends was Hannah Stein, who's a great poet, and she was a great influence for me, and she has helped to shape the way things have gone in Davis. Um, and over the years, I've seen some incredible changes here, just in terms of the geography. Um, when when I first moved, in one of the second places I lived, it was all open tomato fields um, that I could see across from our home on Drummond, and now it's all houses. So the city has grown tremendously. Um, One of the things I did as a poet was to go and to um, encourage poetry in some of the rest homes. And I did that by reading and also by encouraging the other people to read there. And that was a lovely experience. Um, the it's I have to confess, when I first moved to Davis, I thought, oh, from San Francisco, I was not very happy to be here. And I thought, oh, I can hardly wait to get away. And now I couldn't dream of going away or living any other place. I'm so happy to be here. And a part of this
Well,
is
I
all the wonder of friends.
Well, I'd venture to say that a lot of people could say that about Davis, and part of the reason for that is because of people like you, and again, what you've contributed to this community. Um, I just wanted to mention that I've noticed angels seem to be an interest of yours. Your last collection was called West of Angels, and I think the angels appear in a number of your poems, and I hope it's not too um, too far afield to say that you are an angel, and I feel like I've been communing with an angel for the last 20 minutes in speaking with you. That you just this has been absolute pleasure and wonder speaking with you, Allegra. So thank you for joining us and sharing your joy with all of us here in Davis. And if I may say, may you continue to celebrate the dance of your life. So,
Thank
well, I
you.
am Tim Gaffney. Thank you, and you've been watching in the studio here on Davis Media Access.